welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, federal government announces closure of Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja from Wednesday for rehabilitation of its defective runway. Benin Kingdom monarch appeals for acting president's intervention in attempt by Ijaw communities in Giligili to annex the area. Former Commonwealth Secretary General Emeka Anyoko frowns on abandonment of dreams of Nigeria's founding fathers, says they've been disappointed. And US President Donald Trump signs new executive order, places 90-day ban on people from 6 mainly Muslim nations, Iraq removed from new list.
And in business news tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria disburses additional $367 million to ease forex requests by end users.
On sports news tonight, English Football Association charges Manchester United's Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Bournemouth's Tyrone Mings with violent conduct following clashes between both players.
And from Abuja, High Court in Yola sentences former Adamawa State Governor Bala Ngilari to 5 years in prison for corruption.
We begin tonight from Abuja, where the federal government has officially announced the closure of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport to rehabilitate its runway, which has become defective. Speaking at a news conference in Abuja, the Minister of Information, Mr. Lai Mohammed, says the airport will be closed for 6 weeks with effect from March the 8th, 2017. He gave airline operators the assurance that the Kaduna International Airport is now ready to serve as the alternative airport for Abuja-bound passengers, pending the reopening of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport.
The conference room of the Minister of Information at the Federal Secretariat is filled to capacity as stakeholders converged to witness the news conference announcing the temporary closure of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. The Minister of Information goes straight to make the announcement.
Midnight, Wednesday, 8 March 2017, for the purpose stated earlier. During that time, Abuja flights will be diverted to Kaduna.
The Minister of Transportation and the Minister of State for Aviation assures stakeholders that the Kaduna International Airport is ready as an alternative route to the Federal Capital Territory.
The Ministry of Transportation has kept to the promise we made. We said we will try to be ready for air transportation services to Kaduna.
All exercise in the interest of safety, which is a key word in aviation. Because the word number one in aviation is safety, number two is safety, and obviously, of course, number three is also safety.
On the issue of security, the Inspector General of Police reaffirms the commitment of the police to provide adequate and effective security.
We deploy patrol vehicles along Abuja-Kaduna roads. We have deployed helicopters to cover the airport itself and some of the flash points, between Abuja and Kaduna, the highway there. Especially those areas like Katari, where we have, we have the permission that we need to make some surveillance there to sort of assess the general environment in that area.
The closure of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport is expected to last 6 weeks, and with the closure of the airport, all Abuja-bound air passengers will have to get to the nation's capital through the Kaduna International Airport.
The dream of establishing a seaport at Giligili in Edo State may become a reality after all, and this is because the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has said that the federal government will work closely with the Edo State government to actualize the project. Professor Osinbajo made this known during a town hall meeting with stakeholders from oil-producing communities of the state in Benin City, the state capital, as part of his tour of the Niger Delta region. He also paid a courtesy visit to the palace of the Benin monarch.
The acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, arrives at the Benin airport in the Edo State capital. Governor Godwin Obaseki of Edo State, along with other dignitaries, are on the ground to receive him. Next is an inspection of the guard of honor mounted. From there, he proceeds to the palace of the Oba of Benin. Obaiwai II draws the attention of the acting president to a lingering dispute on the ownership of Gele community.
We are trying to push for the export-free processing zone. We will not really like this to continue because it is what has militated against the development of the area before. We would like to pray that this matter be put to rest now.
The acting president leaves the palace for the New Era College, also in Benin City, for a town hall meeting with stakeholders from the oil-producing communities in Edo State. The issues bedeviling the development of the Niger Delta region top the agenda in this gathering.
In Nigeria Northeast, we have 3 of them. They have not shown sufficient interest in the welfare of their community where they exploit this oil.
In these communities, we want to say that there is no presence of government in all these oil producing communities.
Then a rowdy session ensues. Sections of the crowd launch demonstrations leading to a temporary halt in proceedings. The aggrieved persons say the acting president ought to have visited the oil-producing communities in question. The Edo State governor tries to douse the tension inside the hall as he lists steps to promote economic growth in those areas.
To embark on the following: that we must now spend the resources from this year's budget to develop master plans for each of the 38 oil-producing communities in Edo State.
Professor Yemi Oshibajo concludes the session, assuring the people of the federal government's support for the Gele Seaport project. Professor Yemi Oshibajo promises that he will pay another visit to Edo State. Then it would be straight to the oil-producing communities.
Well, earlier in the day, the acting president had hosted members of the United Nations Security Council at the presidential villa. Professor Yemi Oshibajo told the team that steps are being taken to ensure that the human rights culture is ingrained in the Nigerian military to avoid reports of human rights abuses. Briefing State House correspondents after the meeting, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyama, said the federal government is pleased with the tour of the war-torn zones by members of the council. Our State House correspondent Chukwuma Onekwusi reports.
After the tour of Maiduguri and the rest of the areas ravaged by terrorism in the northeast, it is now time to rub minds with the federal government on their findings. And the acting president chose his conference room to receive them. Among other very important issues on the front burner in this meeting is how to carry the civilian population along in the fight against Boko Haram. The Minister of Foreign Affairs explains.
They saw the calamitous humanitarian crisis there, and they saw how we're engaging with that. Over $2 billion that this government, is investing in that. And so, we had this donor conference, international donor conference in Oslo, and of course, almost $700 million has been made available to us already. And I think that this kind of visit will help us to raise even more money for the humanitarian challenges we're facing. And during the briefing yesterday in Maiduguri, and also today, the Vice President, I think, made that point. the steps that were being taken by our military in institutionalizing human rights, a culture within the military.
Before visiting the seat of government, the United Nations Security Council missioners had met with officials of civil society organizations, internally displaced persons, and women's group. They also addressed a press conference where they urged the Nigerian government to channel funding received to the reconstruction of the Northeast.
We will also be working with our Security Council colleagues on other aspects of follow-up, and we'll be talking privately both to Amina Mohammed and to the UN Secretary General about what more the United Nations itself could be doing in this area. It is not for us as individual members of the Security Council to say what that should be, but we will be going back with our recommendations and our own conclusions. And finally, will each of us be talking to our own capitals, our own governments, about what we are currently doing and whether there is a need to do any more.
The delegation is leaving the country with a pledge that the United Nations Security Council will play their role well in assisting the Nigerian government to tackle the challenges in the conflict zones. Chukwuma Onwekusi, Channels Television News.
The former Commonwealth Secretary-General Emeka Anyoko says that if Nigeria's founding fathers were to see the country today, they'd be disappointed. He was a guest at the 2017 Obafemi Awolowo Memorial Lecture, which was themed The Awolowo Legacy and Its Messages to the Nigerian Youths. Other speakers also called for emphasis on education and national unity if the dreams of the founding fathers are to be realized.
It's been 3 decades since he died, but the legacy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo is still very alive and strong enough to attract VIPs from various fairs to his memorial lecture. For 2017, the theme is the Awolowo Legacy and its message to the Nigerian youth. Former head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, who shared the life and times of the sage, opens the event.
He used his life to preach a message of hope, for which 2 key traits were most needed: character and self-discipline.
Another respectable Nigerian, chairman of the selection committee of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, Chief Emeka Anyoko, explains the reason for the cancellation of this year's prize for leadership, which is normally organized by the foundation. He hinges it on some unpleasant realities in Nigeria, which he says do not represent the qualities of Chief Awolowo.
I have often wondered how Nigeria's founding fathers, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and Sir Ahmadu Bello, how they would feel if they were to rise from the dead to see the Nigeria as it is today. I have no doubt that lamentation and grievous disappointment would be their feeling, especially for Chief Obafemi Awolowo.
The climax of the event is a special lecture, and the guest lecturer, Professor Banji Akintoye, who was a youth and interacted with Chief Awolowo, has chosen to focus on areas which the late sage was passionate about: education and national unity.
That a country like Nigeria, comprising many different nationalities, in order to be able to live in harmony and make progress, needs to establish a rational federal system based on respect for the various nationalities of the country.
The memorial lecture is to celebrate the birth date of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who would have turned 108 years this year. Ini Thompson reporting for Channels Television News.
In part 2, after the break, University of Lagos students protest rustication of 8 student union leaders by the school authorities. That's in a moment. Do stay with us.